Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Zaino with MBO Partners, and today we are going to be talking about how technology is changing how businesses engage the 21st century independent professional. And the topic is going to basically be about the fact that most enterprise organizations that are in need of that scarce expert talent, and when they are willing to procure it on a contingent basis, they generally turn to their more established contingent workforce supply chains that generally work well for engaging other traditional temporary labor and contract workers. However, they appear unsuitable for the 21st century population of independent professionals, as well as the managers and the organizations who need the services of these professionals. And while these more linear contingent workforce supply chain models have delivered on their promise of making contingent worker procurement and deployment faster, more efficient, and more tightly controlled, there remains some gaps. And there also appears to be signs that these supply chain models are starting to approach their limits of reach and effectiveness with the rise of this new independent professional class of worker. So today's session, we're going to speak about how we will show that technology is changing how businesses need to engage this 21st century independent professional worker. And I think you'll find it very interesting. For those of you that do not know MBO Partners, we are a leading provider of enterprise solutions for engaging independent contractors, and we provide a management service for independent professionals and the clients that engage with them. At MBO, we kind of know how difficult it is for one person to navigate a business in today's environment while trying to focus on building a successful consulting company. And we also know that their enterprise clients need peace of mind when working with them. The MBO Partners platform delivers what we call a business operating system with a back office that makes it easy for self-employed professionals and their clients to work together, and doing it in a convenient, tax-efficient, and legally compliant manner. And we've got some experience at doing this. We've processed nearly $2 billion in services with more than 30,000 independent contractors and freelancers, and we've implemented contractor management programs with hundreds of enterprises, including nearly 50 of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States. So let me just go over a couple of housekeeping items here, which are the web controls. On your screen, you'll see that up in the top right-hand corner, you should see this little window, and you could see that you could hit that little screen to give yourself a full screen icon. Hit that icon to give yourself a full screen. You could also ask questions, and please do ask questions in the chat box there. We're going to accumulate these questions, and at the end of the our remarks, which will take about 30 minutes or so, we will open up for questions. Also, we're going to be doing some live tweeting today, so please feel free to tweet and use hashtag MBOWeb as your symbol. So with me, I'm really honored to have Holger Mueller and Andrew Carpi, who are Holger's in reaching us from San Diego. Andrew's in the Silicon Valley area of Northern California, and I'm Zaino. I'm just outside of Washington, D.C., so we're having a true virtual webcast today. Let me introduce Holger Mueller, who is the Principal Analyst and Vice President for Constellation Research, a highly regarded research firm, and Holger is Vice President and Principal Analyst specifically for technology and how there is the fundamental enablers of the cloud and giving them strategy and counsel and advice. He has presented at numerous trade shows, industry events, has a wonderful blog, and apparently speaks many languages, of which he just taught me something about my own name. So Holger, please welcome yourself and tell us why you think this is an important topic for our listeners today.
Well, thanks, Gene, for the great introduction, and I think it's an interesting topic, as I'll show you later, as organizations need to handle mainly disruptions to their business model, and the big one coming is digital disruption. Businesses are becoming more and more software companies, software eats everything, and with that they need more flexible skills, and these skills they can either train inside, but it might be taking them too long to do that, so they will look for the outside. They might not hire them because they only need them for a certain amount of time, and there might be contractors, independent workforce helping them out.
Well, thank you, Holger. Also, Andrew Carpi, who's Principal and Chief Analyst of the research platform, and Andrew's a pretty renowned leading expert in the staffing world and certainly with work arrangement intermediation and researcher, analyst, and advisor on this new world of online work platforms. Andrew is also a avid writer, researcher, articles, moderator, conference speaker, and one of the more brilliant people that is great to have in our industry. So Andrew, please welcome yourself and tell us why you think this is important from your perspective.
Well, thank you, Gene. That's quite a build-up there. It's great to be a part of the panel. It was a pleasure working on the white paper that I know we're going to talk about a little bit about. It's partially the basis of the panel discussion today. But my interest in this subject, which is now several years into, is really about how staffing intermediation is changing with technology, new technology, and shifting needs and norms that govern workforce work arrangements.
Thanks, Andrew. So myself, I'm going to be pretty much taking the position on this panel as the independent contractor advocate and also the voice for the compliance and engagement, which is something that here at MBO we've got quite a bit of experience. So with that, let me remind everyone that this webinar today is based on a paper that Andrew did write that is about engaging the 21st century independent professional workforce. And I would like to say from my perspective at least that one of the biggest shifts occurring in the world of work today is work arrangements and how they're being intermediated by this new online platform paradigm. And Andrew is going to speak about that. But before he does, I really want to give everyone an opportunity to get a sense of the technology revolution that is going on, because that is the one of the main drivers that's driving this new dynamic, and it's really about the cloud. And there is no one better to speak to that than our discussion leader for today, which is Holger. And he's going to talk about the cloud and the future of work, and then he's going to moderate a few questions of how technology is driving significant changes in the work arrangement intermediation, and also then the unique, what we're calling co-evolution of technology in the 21st century rise of independent professional workers. And then I'm going to give some closing remarks on how MBO is positioned and what we've been doing to make sure that we play a key role in this dynamic. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Holger to go through his session on the cloud, and I think this is something that a lot of people will find very interesting. Certainly, most of us in our industry are not necessarily technologists, and Holger has a tremendous resume that I think is going to really provide some good perspective. So take it from here, Holger.
Thank you so much, Gene. Well, I want to talk a little bit about what is cloud, because often, pun intended, the definition is a little cloudy here. And how is the cloud changing the way how business and people interact and engage? And lastly, how the cloud impacts work and what we do. And we cover this under a research stream called the future of work, which focuses all about how do we work, when do we work, with what do we work, where do we work, if we even work. And the cloud has a tremendous impact on these. If you have a look at the next slide, we look at a good definition from a national standards body, which basically defines cloud around 5 criteria: self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. To make it easy, the most important for you is to remember rapid elasticity of resources. What that means is that for the first time in computing's history, you easily, as a company, as a small medium business, as an independent contractor, you can easily provision computing resources. And computing resources are what you have in your computer. That is CPU, that is storage, that is networking, and the capability of tying that all together. And the nice thing about the cloud is it makes it elastic. It is available when you need it, at amounts you need it, and if you don't need it, you usually, in most cloud contracts, you don't pay for that. So elasticity, if you never heard of cloud or the whole thing is a little cloudy for you, the thing to remember is all about elasticity. Have computing resources when you need them and only pay for them when you use them. Huge departure from the past, right, where you had to look into what is my system, what do I need to provision, what is my most resource-intensive run. If you think of enterprise applications, that's usually closing of books, running payroll, or doing a manufacturing run. If you now have a cloud-based solution, all that worries about when you run it, how much you run it, what computing resources needed is all done by your back-end provider of that software. Huge simplification for you. And the top 5 motivators here are really this flexibility and scalability. I'm quoting from a venerable IBM research report from 2011, which is nice because it's global. It doesn't just give us the hype of Silicon Valley, but where the world is moving. You see flexibility and scalability is the most important benefit here. And then coupled with reducing operating and capital expense, right? You don't have to buy that hardware anymore. You only have to pay for it when you use it, and that gives you tremendous efficiency as an organization. But also means you can ramp up workers or employees or externals in a much easier and better way. You no longer have to provision for their seats, for their hardware. If you have a seasonal business, the cloud is a tremendous business enabler for you here. Look at the next slide. So it becomes a business enabler or the business platform. We strongly advise you for anything new that you might be considering to buy, to implement, to go on, it should be cloud-based platform for exactly the benefits you mentioned before, which makes it more easy for you to procure these services and only pay for them when you need them without having to worry about scalability. And that's the interesting thing, that pretty much all of the innovations happening in the HCM arena are all cloud-based since 4 or 5 years at least. If you're not cloud-based system, we advise you look at that carefully and see what a potential migration might mean for you. And we're taking these trends, by the way, from our top 10 HCM trends for 2014 and beyond. This is too short to go through all of them. This is trend 5. The next slide will actually cover trend number.
So Holger, I'm just going to jump in for a moment. So the the whole underlying theme here, obviously from a technology perspective, it's about making sure you can share computers and scale up or down. I don't need a lot of capital expenditures, but the underlying theme here, which totally relates to the workforce, is it's about speed and capacity and being able to turn things on and off pretty quickly without a lot of time in between and a lot of a cost and friction, which I think is certainly changes the business dynamics for every business.
Right, it changes dynamics, but it's also a huge enabler for new business to start.
Yes.
Because they don't need their own infrastructure, they don't need their IT infrastructure. It's also a huge motivation for people who might be not in work or looking at a contracting workspace to get up to speed without having to procure software, install it, deal with all of that. But they can right away be active in business from after a couple of days maximum. All they need is a computer and an internet connection. Yeah. On the flip side, so coming to trend 7 on our cloud trends here, is that people have been users have experienced that there used to be a huge lock-in for the on-premise install. You had to buy the hardware, you had to install it, you had to have the consultants, you would only upgrade a couple of years or even longer. Significant sunk costs, significant lock-in for you as a business, but it's not also everything is rosy on the cloud side ultimately, because vendors often ask you for an advance for a couple of years or even 3 years, and then it turns out now that companies have more experience about being in the cloud, that moving from one cloud to another is not as easy as it's suggested by the vendors. So what's important is like when you rent a house or an apartment, right? You want to get along with the renter of that house and apartment because you know ultimately you can move, but moving is a lot of work. And
Right.
as easy as was described before, it's by far not that. So have good relations, pick the right vendors for your house. Gene, you want to say something?
Well, no, I think it's a really good point that you know, cloud is really convenient, but if you are locked in, how, you know, is there a lot of change going on from a technology point of view that are companies finding that they do change frequently, or is it something that you know, they generally stay because of the transfer cost and inconvenience is so great that they tend to be locked in?
The lock-in is definitely much lesser on the cloud side, but you have to move your automation from one cloud to another cloud, so it's not as easy as a walk in the park, right? My best examples I tell people is you're staying in a hotel and in the middle of the night you got woken up because they're building something or there's an emergency or something. Do you want to change hotel rooms at 2 a.m. in the morning? Probably not, right? So it's going to be too much work for you to pack everything up and move to another part. So consider this, that you have a good relationship with your vendor. Consider that everything is set up well in what's called an SLA, a service level agreement, but still be ready for the case you want to move, you have to move to do it, right? But it's no fun for anybody, but it's much, much easier in the cloud than it used to be with on-premise installed software.
Right.
And the next thing that enterprises are learning right now is taken from our cloud trends, no longer our HCM trends for 2014 and beyond, is companies are realizing I have more pieces of my automation in the cloud. In the past, it was all about how do I integrate that piece of automation in the cloud with the rest of my enterprise automation, which was running on-premise. And vendors and enterprise and frankly also IT departments had pretty good stories on to integrate that part of automation. Now we're talking about having multiple pieces of automation in the cloud, and we have to do a cloud-to-cloud integration of these systems. And that is much harder. The good news is there are some vendors specializing on this, but this is the new challenge for executives who often make in the line of business the decision to deploy a cloud automation package. In the past, they had to go back to IT asking for forgiveness after that decision to integrate it. Now the integration is no longer being able to talk to IT because guess what? They have to integrate what they want to run on today with what they decided 2 years ago, which is also running in the cloud. And often these vendors haven't talked to each other, and they have to find a way now to integrate these different pieces of automation that are in the cloud.
Great.
So when we think about what we're talking about today on this webinar, we have the 9 P's which matter for the Chief People Officer. We have 9 S's which matter for social adoption and content adoption. I took 3 of them from each area and walked them through content-wise and how they matter and how the cloud helps you with that. Right? The first of them is speed. Yeah, you have to become faster. Technology is moving faster. Business models are moving faster. Over 50% of the FTE 100 are gone since the last 10 years. Right? They are gone because they went too small, they went out of business, they got acquired. But if you look back who was in the FTE 100 10 years ago, 50% of them are done. Speed matters. You have to become a faster, more agile enterprise. But you have to have, coming over the next one, you have to have the right skills. So as I mentioned in the intro, companies have to look at training their employees. So I personally am a strong believer in investing in your own human capital, but there are certain limits in what you can train your existing workforce and come up to speed with that. So that it creates the need for getting skills from the outside, for increasing your talent profile overall on a longer permanent base, or getting skills on temporary base because you only need that, let's make an example, that digital marketing expert to help you with web presence and your search engine optimization for 3 weeks to get you running, and then maybe only 2 days a month. So the skills might be coming from the outside. social is a tremendous important influence right now, is for the first time employees get a very strong voice for the good and for the bad. Right? One disgruntled, not happy employee being treated right or wrongly, but having a big voice outside can not only harm your hiring prospects, right? Look at Glassdoor and similar sites like that, but even worse, can damage your sell-side prospects. The customers say, I'm not going to do business with a company who does this to their employees. And that's something enterprise has to be very aware of. That's a double-edged sword helping them. It's helping them tremendously in one key part, bringing the talent, those skills in. On the social recruiting side, where social is the driver to get better talent on board.
And also, Holger, related to contract workers, if you have one or a small group of irate contract workers with, the power of social in terms of voice, that not only could hurt your brand and like you said, your buy side and your sell side, it also could have significant legal implications due to the regulatory issues around all of the gray areas of labor and tax law.
Right, absolutely. Just look at the scrutiny Apple had with the issues, right or wrong, don't want to judge, don't even know the details, with Foxconn in China. Think now all that would be happening in the US with 2/3 of these employees or contract workers having Facebook and Twitter accounts and communicating about it outside of work. Run the sentiment analysis about that, and not only employees, future employees and future talent will notice, but equally the selling and partner side of that enterprise. So it's a double-edged sword, like all of innovation having their pros and cons to look at.
Right.
And it comes to going on in clockwise direction, it comes back to passion. Companies want to have passionate employees and contractors who are motivated and aligned along these goals, right? The word engagement has been beaten up almost to death, but it remains a problem for enterprises to communicate correctly and then motivate their workforce to strive toward these goals. Performance is very important. You want to track how well are we doing overall as a company, and then tie it down to the individual members of your workforce, and then see what you can improve. Again, we talked about training, but you might also come to the place where you have to upgrade your talent, improve your talent. And last but not least, right with speed, connected with speed, is as companies know they have to become more agile, have to move faster, the traditional hardwired organizational structure is not helping them to move their business models beyond to where they are today. They don't enable them to respond to their competitors. So what they start more and more is coming to become a project-based organization where there's certain short, medium-term goals between 3 to 6 months and a little bit beyond, no longer than a year, where companies form project teams. And these project teams are no longer necessarily built completely by employees from the inside, but they complement with skills on a temporary basis or on a longer-term basis by outside specialist contractors to help the company achieve this goal. And it's also good news from another perspective that I often say when I talk to audience, almost inhumane to have a person work the same job for more than 3 years, right? Because we all know the first year they're learning, the second year they're getting good, the third year they're getting bored. Now, nobody has to be worried that that should be happening, but you should have this conversation. Even forget about all the outside, forget all these trends. As a good leader in an enterprise, you should talk to your employees after 2-3 years. You've achieved what you wanted. What's your next challenge? And this is especially important because those horizontal skills of moving employees laterally across the enterprise are becoming more and more valuable for enterprises who traditionally have looked at vertical career paths, and they should much more look at horizontal career paths, because guess what? You have to change your business model to adapt to a challenge from a competitor to address a new market. You need employees who know how different functions in the enterprise tick and work. And it's only going to be employees who spend 2-3 years in these different functions. You only get that with a more project-based view of even your internal salaried employees.
Terrific. Well, these are really, really good little nuggets of information: the speed, the skills, the social, the passion, the performance, and project. Thanks for putting that together, Holger.
My pleasure, right? And as an intro, how they matter to you, taking a little analogy from a popular game, Pac-Man, as you know, speed and project are the ones from the 6 I presented to you, which probably are the most important ones. You want to be able to set up these project teams with both internal and external resources quickly, and you have them execute fast to achieve your goals and stay competitive, frankly, in your business. Because if you don't do it, other people will be doing that.
Just a quick point. I think that's excellent perspective, and it's interesting. I think that increasingly in the area of workforce management, we're hearing much more discussion about the use of terms like cloud labor or elastic workforce. And it's actually technologies like cloud and related technologies that are, as we're going to discuss soon, that are coming together in terms of special kinds of platforms that support work actually being arranged and conducted in this kind of cloud paradigm where speed and more discrete projects and activities are more and more significant.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an analogy here, and it's really very interesting, and it really comes down to speed, agility, and lack of capital or reduced capital to get started.
And also the technology. The technology promoting peer-to-peer relationships, so in effect direct engagement, which is sometimes in the past technology has gotten in the way, but the newer technologies, including cloud, are promoting direct engagement, which and collaboration, which is extremely important in the area of effective workforce.
Right, and if you want to apply how important elasticity is from a technical term, right, we could even coin how important elasticity is from a human resource standpoint to get the right people from inside, outside the enterprise on the right project to make a difference and create a favorable outcome for the enterprise. Quickly.
What a great transition.
There you go.
So the question is, like we said, how do you do today to get contingent workers, independent professionals, and enterprises better engaged? And does the current, as we touched a little bit, the staffing supply chain meet the needs of enterprises and who they're trying to procure the independent professionals? How do you see that, Andrew?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Very much relates to kind of the technology shift that you have been discussing, Holger. And there is a term called contingent workforce that the professionals use, of which independent professionals are a part. And over the past 20 years or so, there's been a very large infrastructure, including processes and a whole array of technology that has grown up, particularly around large enterprises for managing contingent workforce. And largely, what has driven the creation of this kind of workforce or contingent workforce supply chain has typically been the requirement for large enterprises to have a more flexible workforce and to use temporary types of workers, and also as that's done to control the cost and mitigate the risk of using such workers. So a lot of the development of this supply chain and this infrastructure has been driven by larger enterprises and their procurement organizations, and that's resulted in the development of labor supply chains or contingent workforce supply chains that kind of resemble industrial supply chains for commodities as opposed to people. And so, whether that is a really a way that is a way of engaging workers and independent workers that is effective, particularly for professional workers, is a big question. And most of these supply chains have really been geared toward the management of temporary agency workers, and which in the U.S. accounts for about $120 billion of spend, or $100 billion of spend annually, according to SIA, Staffing Industry Analysts. And so these supply chains with the various technology among different entities that has developed over 1 to 2 decades, it's very good for the management. It's been very effective for the management of commodity-like temporary agency workers. And in addition to that, there has been some degree of extension of these contingent workforce practices and processes and the supply chain practices to larger structured projects. But so that accounts for maybe, I think the most recent estimate that I saw of spend under management within VMS and MSP types of models was something on the order of $100 billion. But there's a very large segment of independent contractors, which SIA estimates to be approximately worth $350 billion in spend just in the U.S., that most of which is not being managed within these supply chains. So, where I come out is these supply chains and a way of engaging certain types of temporary contingent workers has grown up, but it's, to some extent these models and the technology underlying them has become pretty mature, and much of it does not extend to the world of independent contractors, which is vast and includes that population of independent professionals. And there are, for example, companies like payrollers and ICs that provide minimal support in terms of employer of record and agency of record types of services and payrolling and payment transaction services. But these are, traditionally these have not really been engagers and managers of independent contractors as such, just transaction processors. So, Gene, I don't know what you have to add to that.
Quite a bit, but I'll try to keep it short, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, I would say the direct answer to the question is, contingent workers today are engaged generally through their contingent work program, which, like Andrew said, is really for a homogeneous, really geared towards high transaction, cost efficiencies, command control. When you get into the rise of what I call the rise of the independent professional class of worker, which is rising by the millions every year, and really has been liberated by all the technology that Holger just spoke about, but in addition to that, not only cloud and not only mobile, not only social, but also there's been a cultural change in the environment where it's more of an open talent, where certainly it's been more formalized by companies like LinkedIn, but there are more and more communities and marketplaces where the internet has made it easier for talent to be marketed and for buyers of talent to find talent. And rather than going through a more traditional kind of monolithic, linear procurement process with suppliers and a supply chain and intermediators along the way, making sure that the right commodity is being acquired for the right price because there's competition. What happens with the independent professional worker, they tend to not use those types of scenarios. They're generally working at a more strategic level, larger projects, projects that are ranging, in the 20s, 30s, 40, $100,000 projects. These types of projects and these types of strategic and more important and more complex work arrangements are not going to be done through a distributing of a requirement or a purchase order to get people to bid on. They basically happen as a result of person-to-person interactions and trust, and they're usually a result of someone either referring someone personally, or they've built that relationship. Maybe they found their profile on LinkedIn, they've had conversations, or maybe they met somebody at an event or user group, or a former alumni of the firm has come back to do some work. or they were with another firm, another consulting firm, and they went off on their own, and now they're individuals. But so there's some type of trust, personal relationship, and then at that point, the organization, the manager that needs that talent, is going to just directly engage with that talent, because the importance of getting that unique individual expert is more important than the process. And I believe, we're going to talk about in coming questions and sections of this session we're in, that there's new things developing that will actually enable this type of worker and the buyer of this type of worker to actually be done in a very efficient way. But I think the reason why those numbers, Andrew, that you quoted, where the current contingent workforce programs are getting just a fraction of the spend that's out there, is because those programs are not enabling and not providing the right kind of work arrangement intermediation that's needed for that style of work. So I'll stop there, and I'll let you guys continue.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, and I think, a good part of this is the theme of the discussion today comes back to the technology, and the technology of kind of linear asynchronous chain of different systems and processes that is supported within the existing contingent workforce supply chain today does not seem to support, what you pointed out as the critical peer-to-peer kind of relationship and the kind of engagement that is required between managers within enterprises and consultants and independent professionals to form relationships, productive relationships. So I think we're going to see that the technology is very important.
Yeah, and I think the visibility is changing tremendously, right? I mean, it used to be who I know, who knows someone who I know, and that would be my network if I had an immediate staffing need.
Right.
Now my visibility with LinkedIn as one medium, but in general, like we see a lot of recruiting companies using Facebook much more because they have more talent there, and you get a more, not just a professional view of the employee, but you get also some of their social pieces, because some people who professionally might be interesting as contractors might not be the right ones if you look at their Facebook account. So it gives you a complete picture, and complementing these, I think, will be key to get more independent workforce onshore inside of the company for projects or longer-term contracts.
Absolutely.
So how?
So, go ahead.
I think we can look at the next
Yes.
slide.
Yeah.
Perfect. So how is the technology changing, and how are these arrangements getting intermediated today, and what is changing important unique to an independent professional if you take their vantage point?
Yeah, well, I'll just start off here. I think this kind of goes to the point of the paper that we published not too long ago, and also to kind of my core research, which is pointing to the rise of really a kind of a new paradigm for intermediating and bringing workers and hirers together, which is based on platform structures. And by platform structures, I don't necessarily mean that strictly in a purely technology sense, but in the sense of a kind of business model or a model for economic agents to get together and interact and affect some kind of economic outcome. And so in the world of workforce, alongside this traditional supply chain, kind of linear supply chain, we've started to see the rise of, and very much related to, cloud technology. We've started to see the rise of online work platforms, and many of those which have arisen thus far and are platforms that have linked together small businesses and online freelancers that may be working in many different parts of the world. And those platforms have been developing over the past 10 years approximately, and now becoming somewhat mainstream. But as they have done that, they have demonstrated that they actually represent potentially a whole new paradigm for intermediating all kinds of work arrangements, and not just online work between freelancers in one country or another and small businesses in one country or another, but it could be any kind of work arrangement, even those that have been today performed or arranged through more traditional means. And there are great advantages to these platforms which can incorporate a lot of different technologies, helpful technologies such as social technologies and analytic technologies. And they represent a way of, to some extent, supporting a very direct way, an efficient and speedy way of connecting and people who need to have certain kinds of work performed, and those specialists that can actually perform that work. So I think that this trend is something that is going to be extremely important to how enterprises and independent professionals begin to interact and arrange their work together and get things done.
Yeah, I mean, basically, technology has started to and is accelerating in what it does to replace what a lot of traditional firms would typically do, specifically when it gets to matching professional service talent with projects. And those of us that might follow economics, there's a Nobel laureate, Ronald Coase, who's University of Chicago. I think he's 103 years old now and still kicking, but made a prediction I think in the middle of the last century was that the purpose of a firm or a company is to make it efficient for work to get to people and people to get to work. And I think as we're seeing technology getting more involved in person-to-person, peer-to-peer, as Andrew called it, and that the value is transferring and disintermediating a lot of what a traditional firm would do. So obviously there's lots of things that a firm does that's really important, but for project work and for getting a person on site to do work and to put them there, technology is taking a lot of that onto its own hands, disintermediating, making things more efficient, scaling elasticity, and very much taking advantage of what is the same successful cloud within work. So I'm going to let Holger go on to the next question here.
Yeah, perfect. I think it's very interesting to see how all this makes the whole workforce significantly, or the engagement of the workforce, more frictionless. So the question to me is, how will this engagement work arrangement change the intermediation between the professional independence in the cloud-based world? What are we looking at today, and where, ideally, if you can look at that too, where are we today and where are we going to head tomorrow? Andrew, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, well, I think that online platforms are going to play a very big role in this intermediation, and online platforms are going to be cloud-based. They're going to be in the cloud, and I think that these platforms are also going to evolve, and we see this happening already. They're going to evolve to, number one, include or to address different segments or populations of workers and different types of work. And this is definitely something that we're seeing. And the reason for that is, as Gene pointed out earlier in his discussion, talking about independent professionals versus other types of contingent workers, the way in which different types of workers work, are engaged, respond to engagement, what the requirements are for engaging them is very different across different different segments. So I think we're going to see platforms that are emerging across different segments. And secondly, in order to do all the things that are going to be needed to address the needs of that segment, whether it's on the enterprise side or it's on the worker side, platforms, and this is a very natural characteristic of online platforms. Platforms are going to begin to evolve as ecosystems that are that include and integrate with a whole range of different service providers that may be important to serving a particular segment of worker and business and use. So that's what I see happening. I see more work, particularly for the independent professional workforce, being intermediated through a specialized kind of platform that is surrounded by a whole set of service providers that platform has attracted and integrated with for the purpose of serving that special population.
Very interesting. Gene, where do you see it heading for tomorrow?
Well, you know, I think we're on a path, and you know, I've often heard Andrew in the past speak about you know, iTunes, right, Andrew, as an example of creating a new dynamic of how to disintermediate the distribution of music to reduce costs, increase scalability, and to create what you call that ecosystem or that digital platform. And I see that happening in the work environment as well. And actually, I think, Andrew, music is a good case study, except I would go back further than iTunes. I think it started back in the day with Napster.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into that. Yes, indeed. Go ahead. So.
Well, I'm going to get into it. So that, you know, as we all know, Napster, for those of us from back in those days, you know, it was a music sharing, right? But it basically, you know, it wasn't, didn't really fully develop because it didn't focus on all the different elements of what's needed to make an ecosystem work, right? It didn't have the cooperation and the coordination of the regulatory authorities and the buyers and the sellers of the music and the artists and so forth. And then, of course, what Steve Jobs did with iTunes, he fixed that. He went and created all those arrangements, made sure that there was everything was in a legally compliant way, and created those intermediation arrangements, not just sharing, but also allowing that full cycle of transactions to take place. And I think what's happening today in the online world is that there's crowdsourcing, there's the online marketplaces, there's, I think, Andrew, the last I've read your paper, there's 200 of these popping up. And I think there's all different where they are in a spectrum as to what it is that they do, and whether it's just matchmaking, whether it's just profiling, whether it is payment, whether it's how it's payment, whether it's for the lower end transaction, or I really haven't seen many on the higher end project-based transactions yet, or whether it's, you know, a LinkedIn or whatever. But I think what's needed is, and I think, Andrew, this is where you were headed, is that there needs to be an ecosystem where multiple platforms play together to complete that full impact of what's needed to totally create a legally compliant as well as a cost-efficient and disintermediated as well as scalable way of talent finding projects finding talent, and transacting business together. So, you know, I think that's where we're headed. I think we're headed in terms of a lot of different players working together, interoperability. I think people having their own niche. One thing about human beings is that everyone is different, and you're certainly not going to have one size fits all, and we don't see it that way. We see that there's a need for different segments of the workforce, and there's also a need for different components of that whole work intermediation process, and certainly I see that happening. So I'll stop there and Holger, let you take it, because I know we're kind of hitting up against some time frame here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? The analogy of iTunes and what Napster broke down. In terms of not having the legality, I think it's important that there has to be legal, statutory compliant platforms for the independent workforce to engage on. But I think we're through our questions. Actually,
well,
no.
we've got one more question here.
Exactly. We have one more. But the interesting thing is, which services can an independent contractor, workforce member see, and which make him more efficient, engaging with the enterprise looking for him, and how can, most important, MBO help you with that? I think that's for you, Gene.
So,
well,
go ahead, Andrew. You want to
no, I
kick it
was
off?
just going to add quickly. Yeah, I think that I mean, one of the things that we have been seeing is that there is within this platform ecosystem world a breakdown of services, and ranging from exchange and marketplace types of services, payment services, compliance services, curation services, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're seeing is that what services are necessary and what services are core to a particular workforce ecosystem will vary depending upon the ecosystem. And as we looked at independent professionals, you know, consistent with a lot of our discussion so far, we've seen that engagement and also a lot of the legal management is very important. And you know, that's one of the reasons why we see that MBO has the potential to become a kind of core or keystone platform in this particular ecosystem.
So, thanks, Andrew. So what I'm going to just to close up, because we do have a lot of questions, and I'd like to get to some of them, and I hope Holger and Andrew, I don't know if you could stay a few minutes past the hour,
Sure.
But we do have a number of questions here, so maybe we can hit some of them. But let me just wrap up with kind of a way to apply everything we've just been talking about. You know, a lot of it is academic, and maybe some of it a little conceptual to see. But what we've done here is we have actually partnered with our first online work platform called Work Market. We're actually talking to, you know, there's lots of other networking and marketplace partners that we're talking to. Zintro is also one that we've worked with. But what MBO sees as what we call a managed contractor cloud for independent professionals is where a client, an enterprise client, can actually curate its own pools of talent that it wants to use over and over again at different times for different purposes, but be able to build this pool, distribute work to them, provide them the appropriate intermediation arrangements that's needed from a legal and also from a professional perspective. When you're engaging work with someone that's going to do a $90,000 project, you have to handle them a certain way differently than someone that you're going to send a $200 project to. And there's a different set of requirements. There's different legal issues. There's a whole different protocol. And when you have a large, you know, community of these individuals, you need to organize them. You want to rate them. You want your managers across your organization to be able to redeploy the talent that's most appropriate for your organization, the ones that you have been most successful with your organization, the ones that have more familiarity in certain areas. And it needs to be an overall managed program with the right analytics and so forth. So this is what we call a managed contractor cloud, which is based on a platform of engagement focused on the professional worker who is working on a project basis. And again, it's not a open marketplace. It's much more of a private community that is handpicked by the client and build a inventory of talent that it will use for certain areas. So with that, I'm going to move to some questions because I know we're right at the hour. And the first question here is from one of our listeners that says, how many IT jobs will be displaced or eliminated by cloud implementation? And what will be the impact on independence? Holger, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. We hear that all the time. Ultimately, I think some of the more bread and butter jobs will disappear. Most of them will switch, because at the end of the day we see a vast increase in how much compute power is being delivered to us, right? If you think about the explosion in storage, people having terabytes at home, if you think about what broadband is being fed to consumers and enterprise today, and what CPU capacity we are having in our hands, literally in our hands with our smartphones. So it will be old skills, people doing maintenance on hard disk, I wouldn't be so optimistic on. Most of them will stay if they advance their skills. They may not be working for a corporate IT function anymore, but they might be working for one of the cloud service providers, right, which still is a good paycheck, probably even better one, because they need more specialized skills than the more generic IT skills you find in small enterprises.
Good. Well, this next question is somewhat related. From another member of our listeners, how may an independent professional take advantage or leverage technology to fuel his or her growth and opportunity?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think one of the obvious ways available now that wasn't, say, 10 years ago, is to actually become a member of an online marketplace, such as Work Market, for example, and there are others, and that will certainly allow an independent professional to gain greater visibility. Will support the professional's professional brand, et cetera, as well as provide some access to other services. So I think that's certainly one way to meet that need.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Andrew, in that, certainly it's easier today than ever before, like never before, to for one person to launch a business using technologies, tools, and really, again, everything that Holger said in the beginning in terms of cloud being the way to accelerate and get to accelerate the productivity without having upfront costs, and you kind of could, pay for whatever you eat, so to speak. And for someone that is, a small single-person company, there are services and tools out there that will enable them to be very productive and successful and focus on delivering high-quality work and professional development for themselves, and certainly, MBO also provides all of the, a service like that in terms of its back office services and access to things like that. But certainly, like Gmail, Google, and building websites and things like profiles with LinkedIn and like you said, Work Market for finding projects and so forth. So I think there's tremendous opportunity. I think more and more, that's why we're seeing a growth in independent professionals. I'm going to take one more question here, and Holger, I think this one is perfect for you. Mm-hmm. Which of the social, cloud, or mobile trends do you see having the largest impact on human capital management?
That's a great question. I think you have to answer differently. As an enabler, I think it's cloud, because it's behind everything which happens innovative for human capital management, right? Mobile is a platform, right, which you work for, and we see more and more things being built for mobile and more vendors taking a mobile-first approach, which makes sense because we consume so much more on our vendors. But the direct impact on how we do HR, especially on the recruiting side right now, where you have a significantly better visibility into talent that's out there, is from social. Right? So sorry if I don't answer it directly which is the one. It really depends on your direction. I think all matter, but directly to HCM would be social.
Okay. All right. Well, I know it's 5 past the hour, and I apologize to the listeners if we went over, but I want to thank Holger and Andrew for joining us at MBO on this webinar, and we have contact information up on the screen. Please, if you have any other questions, or I will try to get the questions that we did not get to answered and distributed out. So by all means, please stay in touch with us, and we do have a ongoing series of webinars, and would love to continue. We have these types of great guests that add to the discussion and this whole topic of independent work. Holger, thank you very much. Andrew, thank you very much. And if you have any closing remarks, please go right ahead.
No, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure and great conversation. I hope it was useful to the audience.
Same from my standpoint as well. So thank you very much, Gene.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.